Welcome to the Born Limitless Masterclass. We're so excited to be here today to dive into some details to crush your limited belief systems, cultivate an infinite mindset, unleash your true potential. I'm your host today, Doug Stringer, and we're the author, Rick Torrison, who wrote the book, Born Limitless. And so, Rick, I want to jump right into our time here today. And let's talk about, first of all, why did you write this book, Born Limitless?
That's a great question. Before I jump in too far, I just want to say thank you, Doug, for being one of those people that have always invested in me along the way. For our listeners, those of you guys that don't know, we are going to get into this book, but Doug is a good friend of mine, a mentor of mine, and he's been speaking and sowing into my limiting beliefs for a long time. And so a lot of the stories and a lot of my journey, Doug, actually come from our relationship and how you've encouraged me to break free from some of those limiting beliefs. And so I want to thank you first. And you always talk about giving honor, right? And what do you say? We limit our future by the way we fail to honor our past or
Yes.
honor relationships. So, just as we get started, I think it's a lesson for everybody that's going to be watching this, making sure that you are a person of honor and you honor those people. We're all standing on somebody's shoulders, right? And you're some of the shoulders I get to stand on. So I'm honored that you're here today and helping me walk through this process.
Well, we've learned together over the many years that relationships give definition to our lives and destinies.
That's
and
right.
So it's all about relationship, isn't it?
It is. Yeah. I mean, I don't think it initiated with you. Maybe it was Edwin Lewis Cole or something that said relationships define our destinies, right? That whole idea. And it's so true. So all of you that are watching, as we get started, value those relationships, honor those relationships. And remember, you didn't get to where you are on your own. And you're not going to get to where you desire to be on your own. And part of what we're going to talk about is this new book, Born Limitless. It was a labor of love. It's part of my story. I didn't realize how, what's the right word? Exposing writing a book can be. I know you've written several books. You've got some amazing books out there that you've written, one on leadership as well, Leadership Awakening. So, but writing this book, I thought, that's easy. I'll write it, we'll get it done. And I got it done. I had an editor, had a lot of help with it. And then it was done, and I'm done editing, and I'm realizing I can't sit in everybody's living room. So as you're reading this book and you're looking at it, I'm going to try to help you unpack some of the things you're going to read, because I can't sit next to you and say, here's what I meant there, and here's what I was trying to say there. So really, Born Limitless is a piece of my coaching process. It is one segment, but probably the most important segment of the coaching. I've been coaching for the last 10 years very intentionally, but really probably like you and all that we've done, we've been coaching people, empowering people, speaking life into people pretty much our whole lives. And so I've decided to really put this into a format and a process. So Born Limitless is this understanding that I believe from the very core of my being, it drives everything that I do and all that I am, that all humans were born limitless. The challenge with that is, right, and some of you guys may be asking, going, well, Rick doesn't understand my story. He doesn't know my background. He doesn't know what I've been through. He doesn't know what's happened to me. And you're right, I don't. But I don't think that has anything to do with the fact that in our design, in our createdness, we were born with limitless opportunity and potential. The problem is, and what this book unpacks and talks about, it takes us on a journey, is we all have limiting beliefs in our lives. They may not be in every area of your life, but we have them. There's areas that we're killing it, and then there's areas that we really struggle. And so as I was going through my coaching process, I was realizing with some of the clients, some of the people I worked with, we kept recycling back through things. We weren't able to break through, and we'd get some breakthrough, and then we'd find out we were right back where we started. I thought, well, what are we missing? What is the gap, right? We're changing behaviors, we're creating new systems, we're talking about processes. And as we were working through it, I realized the gap that we were missing was the fact that we didn't deal with the beliefs that were driving the behaviors. And so we were actually self-sabotaging ourselves based on the beliefs that we were speaking into our own lives or allowing to be spoken over us that we didn't even realize were actually limitations in the process. So, kind of long story with all that, but the heart of this is to really share with people a simple process of where our limiting beliefs come from, how we can identify them, crush them, replace them, and then build a new strategy and behavior system into the greatness, the limitless potential that I believe all of us were designed and created to have. And here's the thing, we'll talk about it. It doesn't matter your circumstances or environment, because this is true in its very core. We just have to align with it and learn how to walk it out and agree with it.
Well, Rick, I really like everything you just said, and it's kind of segueing into the content of your book, but it's more than just theory. It's more than just writing something. It's out of experiences. It's out of your interactions with people, your own life. And that's what I loved about the book, is that you didn't just give us a bunch of theory. You gave us actual reality of living through some of the context of your message. How do we, because you mentioned this over and over, and I love it, says born limitless, because many people have limitations because they're not born thinking, oh, I plan to fail. Everybody has visions of grandeur. I want to succeed. I want to do something, and then life happens.
Right.
Those life happenings become great discouragements or disappointments, and many people get disillusioned or stuck in the past.
Yeah.
How do you get past that place of limitation, being stuck by an experience or by something you've experienced in the past?
That's a great question. It is something we all struggle with. The problem is that most of us don't even realize we struggle with it. And I talk about this a lot. I'm sure I'll come back to this. You're going to hear me say this a lot. We are living, typically, most of us are living in a place of normalcy, things that we call normal, how we operate in our lives. And what I challenge in this process, and we'll talk about this some, I'm sure, is what if that normal that we're living in, that we're settling for, isn't normal? What if there's something more? What if there's something greater? I think all of us, yourself and me included, there's these inner longings and beliefs that we have, but then life happens, as you said, and sometimes those put ceilings over us, and we start settling for something less than we were born or created for. And it all begins with a belief system, a construct that we hold, that we picked up somewhere along the journey in our lives. And that's really what the book talks about. When we start out in the book, as I begin the whole process, the first preface of the book, I talk about this idea is, what if I was a mistake, right? And so I go through this understanding of where the limiting beliefs first began in my life, right? And it started really, and I had nothing to do with it, but I was born in a situation I was a fourth of 4 kids that my mom had, and it was just my mom. We were living in California. This is in the 60s, so you got to understand the context. And she had 3 children before me. She had 2 abortions, and she had 1 adoption she gave away for adoption. So I was born in 65. You guys can do the math, okay? I was born in 65. That means early 60s, she was pregnant, had an abortion. Now, we talk about that today as more of just, this is part of life, regardless of how we feel about it. But back then, it was not something you talked about. It was not something imagined. It was not in the realm of thought at all. Yet there was my mom, because she couldn't go home and she wasn't married, right? She got to me, I was the 4th, and the guy that she was with, same man, all occasions, gave her the same ultimatum, the child or me, and she said, I'm taking the child this time. And he walked. Never met him, never seen him, don't know him, he's never been a part of my life, but she made a decision in that moment. But as I'm growing up, I am growing up in a world, in a single parent home, that was not normal back then. It wasn't part of it. And so that whole understanding of how I was defining and interpreting my environment and the environment around me, right, caused me to feel like I was wrong, bad, something happened. I was not normal based on what normal was. And so that idea that I was a mistake, I wasn't wanted, I wasn't part of a plan, started to ingrain itself in me unintentionally. Right? And that happens. We all have stories like that. You all have a story of markers in your life where something happened and we began to define that thing and define ourselves based on that experience. And that became a limiting belief for me. Mm-hmm. And it started to play out in everything I did the rest of my life. You'll hear me talk about this as we go through this, but all of our actions, our behaviors in our life are tied to a belief. Mm. And just that very understanding, all of our behaviors are tied to a belief. What if that belief is based in a lie? Mm. Then those behaviors are built on a lie. And our life that we're living isn't built on the truth of our createdness, of the possibilities. So we don't even realize it.
So I see exactly what you're saying in your subtitle here, Born Limitless, Crush Limiting Beliefs, Cultivate an Infinite Mindset, and Unleash Your True Potential.
Yeah.
So you're telling, even your own personal story, you had external decisions that were made, or external stressors and circumstances that tried to dictate to you an internal process that you had to overcome.
Yeah.
So obviously this book will help us understand that you can live a certain mindset your whole life, but the way to break that and be born limitless and to be successful and have greater potential is to break loose of those things that were put on us that created this internal conflict.
And the things that we put on ourselves, right? There are things that we had nothing to do with in our lives, circumstances, environments, my environment. I talk about several stories with my kids in different environments and situations that they had no control over, that there was just the environment and circumstance they were born in, right? But that played out in then how we view our lives, our giftedness, our potential, our identity, our relationships, and then how we begin to live into those things and the expectations we set for ourselves and for our future. The problem is that we often run into, and I think what many of you guys that are watching will realize as you're going through this process and reading through the book is there are limiting beliefs that we all have that we don't even know we have. We don't even realize we've settled for something less than is possible. We've given up on a dream or a hope that we had because we've, in our mind, tried so often to break through it and couldn't, right? And so we settle. And I'm saying you don't have to settle. Being born limitless first is about agreeing with that and being able to declare, and I have a lot of declarations. So every chapter, you're going to find at the end of it a call to action. So as you read through the chapter, it's not a big action step. It's a simple mindset shift I ask of people. Will you make a declaration over your life at the end of every chapter that might shift your energy, your beliefs, your mindset just a little bit? We can make a declaration and not fully believe it. But if we keep declaring it, we'll begin to believe it. And as soon as we begin to believe it, our behaviors will start aligning with it.
Well, Rick, you wasted no time, obviously, even in your preface in addressing some of the major challenges that many of us have to face. And in fact, your preface is called I Was a Mistake, and you addressed some of that. But you also talked about some writings you did on the roadmap to significance. So it's easier said than done for many people because we allow those things of our past to hold us back. Now, we can't change our past, but help us to understand how we can make decisions and choices today that do determine that future.
Well, I think part of it is and the book goes through a process, right? The first part of the book in section 1 is really asking you to dare to believe something different, that you could be born limitless, that there is a limitless potential and opportunity inside of you. You may not fully believe it at this point, but if I can help you declare it, begin to propose it as a thought, right? So the first part is, can I begin to recognize that there may be a limitless potential inside of me, and that maybe I've settled for something else. The second part as we go through is really understanding where we are and those limiting beliefs that we have. The first step to freedom, right, is identifying that we're not free, right? In anything that we do, the first step to breaking free, an addiction, whatever it is, we've got to recognize that there's a problem, right? Houston, we've got a problem, right? If we don't recognize there's a problem, we can't do anything about it. We've already predetermined that this is as good as it gets. And it could be something very good. A lot of you may be thinking, well, this is for people who are really struggling and they're not very successful. I work with a lot of people who are extremely successful. What they've found is they're really good in one area of their lives, but they have these limiting beliefs in other areas where they've suffered, where they're struggling. And they don't want to struggle there anymore, but they've just accepted it. And so they come to me and we start coaching and walking through it. And it's starting to recognize the normal they're living in. The first step in the freedom, the first step in this process is, will you consider the normal that you're living in that maybe it's not normal? If you'll say yes to that, if you'll open the opportunity that the normal you're accepting in that area of your life potentially isn't normal, everything can change. The opportunity in front of you is great.
So Rick, and I love the way you've always been really brilliant at this, is the many years I've known you. We've done some pretty significant things together globally, from disaster relief things to actually stadium events all across the country. So you've been with me at the grassroots level all the way to the ultimate events and beyond the events. So you speak from experience as well as a gifted knowledge of organizational skills. A lot of people come to you for your coaching and expertise, consulting, because of those organizational skills and because you dig right in and speak to the issues. It offends some people, but it's
right.
like,
Yeah, I tell people on the front end, like, if you don't want straight,
exactly.
you need to go talk to somebody else. I'll do it with love.
Yeah.
No criticism, no condemnation, no judgment. But man, life's too short to play around, and we've got to just get after it.
And we've heard the term that says you know them by their fruit. So the fruit of that directness and that coaching skill is to help people better themselves.
Absolutely.
So right in your book, the first section 1 is the first 4 chapters called Born Limitless. Let's give a synopsis here because the first chapter is comfort zone or danger zone.
Right.
Let's start kind of breaking this down a little bit.
So like I had mentioned, the first section is first about realization that this is possible. Because if I have to build a foundation for you to stand on before we can actually walk into the freedom and the process to get free. And I've mentioned this a couple of times, this idea of all of us having limiting beliefs. And some of those beliefs that we've held for so long that they just have become normal to us, right? And when they become normal, we settle in and we call it a comfort zone. I'm comfortable here, and maybe I'm successful, maybe I'm not. Maybe my comfort zone is success. Maybe that comfort zone is actually a pit, someplace we're not, but we're there. And we've been there a long time, so I'm used to that. I know what to expect there. I give an example in the book. If you've ever traveled through the mountains, I know you and I have traveled. We've been in some amazing, beautiful places. And when you go through the mountains, I traveled in the Blue Ridge Mountains. I had family that lived in Lynchburg in that area, and I love driving through the Blue Ridge Mountains. And you guys know, if you've ever been into the mountains and you've come to a scenic overlook, if you've ever stopped and gotten out of the car, it's beautiful. Like, you take it all in. It's like, wow, this is amazing. But what don't we do? We don't set up camp. We don't pull out our Easy Boy and our recliners, our chairs, our couch, and put pictures on the wall and settle in and say, this is awesome. I'm just staying here the rest of my life. Because what's waiting for us another mile up the road? Another overlook. Yeah. That's even more amazing and beautiful than the one we just saw.
Yes.
But too many of us settle in on this comfort zone. Say, I've arrived, I've worked hard. And here's the thing. It's okay to be in a comfort zone for a little while, because sometimes we just need to breathe. You just need to take a breath. You just need to celebrate the victory of getting to that place. And I think that's good. But the longer we stay there, that comfort zone becomes a danger zone, because we start settling. And you know this, and most of you know this. Everyone talks about it. Growth doesn't happen in places of comfort. Growth happens in places of tension. When we get outside of that comfort zone and we risk and we step into an area that we're unfamiliar with or might feel a little scary, it's in those places that we see the greatest growth in our lives. You don't grow when you're comfortable. Think of an instrument, right? Stringed instrument. If the strings are loose and hanging on the guitar, my son's a guitar player, you can't make good music. It sounds terrible. It doesn't even make a sound. But with the right amount of tension, you make beautiful music. That's the difference between being in a comfort zone and getting outside of that comfort zone where the possibility of growth is. And so this whole first section is recognizing that and understanding this. The other big piece of the first section before we go to the second section is this. We are all going to fail. I'm going to look at the camera. Listen, all y'all that are watching this. If you haven't failed already, which I'm sure you have, you will. You will stumble. You will fall. You will make a mistake. Every one of us do. But we're not defined by the stumbling and the falling and the mistakes that we make. We're defined by whether or not we get back up. See, we're not a failure because we fail. We're only a failure when we refuse to keep going, when we refuse to get up. And so we've got to get over that. We've got to give ourselves some grace. You've got to give yourself some grace to say, you know what, I failed, but I'm not a failure. I won't define myself by my actions of what I didn't do well. And so if we can get through that, that's part of this first place, is recognizing you may have failed, everyone has, but you're not a failure. So keep walking and understand that you are the miracle. Everything you need for the greatness that you have been called, created, and destined for is already in you. It's just a matter of decluttering the beliefs and the things that have happened throughout our lives that have created a mindset that says we're less than we actually are.
Well, your chapter 1, let's get back to that for a moment, because I know it's one of 4 chapters for the first section called Born Limitless. And again, let's address again, because you talked about the comfort zone or danger zone. And then in that chapter, you also give us a CTA or a call to action. What would that be? What would be a practical call to action for us, to get out of our comfort zone and also to not be afraid, or, many people are limited by their fears. One of my concerns even growing up was like, how do I overcome my own personal insecurities and fears? Because you have to overcome that to even step into your place of potential.
Yeah, well, I'd mentioned already that every chapter has a call to action. Mm-hmm. Each of them are about declarations. They're about statements that we would speak over ourselves. And so what I ask you to do in the first chapter that you'll find throughout each of them is to make a declaration over your life before you move forward. And so in this first one, the declaration is recognizing and naming your comfort zones. Where are those areas you've gotten comfortable? And I'm not saying they're bad things initially, but have you stayed there too long? Have you worn out your welcome? So if you can identify those comfort zones and the beliefs associated with those comfort zones of why you're staying there, that's the first step to begin to shift and change and move through it. And then that's what the next few chapters talk about, is belief and unbelief, and understanding that we all may have certain beliefs, but there's still things that we don't believe, that we settle for less than. And we've got to understand to press through into those areas of unbelief.
There's so much content and information in each chapter that obviously it'd be impossible for us to be able to unpack it all. But that's why I think this is a great opportunity for you to address these issues in a summary form, so that people can engage you to go deeper. Because really what you have and carry is deep and wide in so many ways. And I think it's a critical message today for so many people, especially when their hearts are overwhelmed with the complexities of our world, our nation, the economy, so many things. People are limited in their thinking, but we can break loose out of that even in our difficult times.
Yeah, it's just stepping out of fear and stepping into faith, whatever that means for you, stepping into a place of could there be, is there can be, and what does it look like to step there? And so, that's really, as we look through this, that's really what the first part is about, is can I even step? Mm-hmm. And so as we go through that first part, that's where we're at. That second section, then really we start turning the corner, and I start helping you identify what are those limiting beliefs in your life, specifically what's holding you back. Where do they come from? What's the framework that we all go through that we have to process to actually get to our freedom and to change a limiting belief to a limitless one? Mm-hmm. And that's really what that second section talks about. This understanding that throughout our life, we all have things that have happened that have caused us to take a pause, that have marked us in different ways.
Well, I know we're moving into this next section, section 2, and it's so intriguing because you went from Born Limitless, section 1, right into You Are Here. And I like your chapter 5. It says, don't forget to flush. Will you address a little bit about the summary of what this means?
Okay, so that one, when I made the transition, I really, what caused me to say this, I'm laughing because when you guys hear this and when you read it, you're going to get a little disgusted with the analogy that I share. But here's the backstory so that you understand when I share it. A lot of times we work through a process of, hey, I have a limiting belief. I replace it with a different belief, right? I work hard and change my behaviors. And we cycle back around to that same place. Typically, more times than not, we actually break through. We give it a good go. We're working really hard, but then we find ourselves back where we were, and we're, like we talked about that mountain, right? We're going around the mountain instead of up the mountain, right? And so this idea of don't forget to flush was this idea of once you identify a limiting belief, and I take you through a process of identifying that belief, I can't, I won't, I never. I talk in the book about paying attention to language and the words that we share, right? Sometimes when we say things over our own lives, or we allow people to speak over our lives saying, well, you can't do that, or you've never been any good at this, or you won't do this, go ahead and focus here. All of those negatives became markers that we begin to embrace and believe that we can't, we won't, or will never. Now that may be true, but I've found in my coaching, most of those statements aren't true. They're just something we've allowed to be spoken over us, and then we started speaking them over us. So when you find a limiting belief, and you replace it, I tell people to write your limiting beliefs on the squares of toilet paper. Just get a marker and write the limiting belief on each one. Do one at a time. Don't group them together because each have their own power. And so I said, once you're done writing it on the piece of toilet paper, wad it up, throw it in the toilet, and flush it. The reason I put in there, once you flush that, down the toilet, here's what we don't do. Think about going to the bathroom. You're clean. You don't reach back in the toilet to go grab that paper out and bring it back into your life, do you?
That's good.
Okay, so that's really disgusting, but I don't think you're ever going to forget what I just said, right? Once you flush it, it's gone. Let it go. It no longer is a part of you. The only way it becomes a part of you again is if you reach back in there and you grab a hold of it and bring it back into your life. Don't do that. I'm not saying you're going to walk in the fullness of that freedom immediately, but that's the first step to begin to change a behavior that's going to create different outcomes. And that's really the desire, but we've got to determine this belief is no longer my identity. This is the identity I'm going to walk in. And when I make that declaration and flush the lie and grab the truth, I now have the greatest opportunity and potential to walk in a different behavior, which will lead me to a different outcome. Right? And that's really what that section was all about, and what I'm talking about in terms of don't forget to flush. Don't reach back in and grab it. Let it go.
Yeah, that's good.
Right?
Well, I think a lot of times we bring in our baggage or our toilet trash
Right.
back into our lives, and we have to let it go if we're going to move on.
You have
we
to.
carry too much baggage, don't
Yeah.
we? Even in relationships and things we've done, and we keep recycling the things of our past that only cause us to fail rather than having our full potential.
And the challenge is, which is what that next chapter talks about, is, and I've said this a couple times, but I think it's worth repeating all the way through. We've had these things happen to us for so long, we don't even realize they're happening. One of the stories I share in the book is about an experience I had. And I mentioned this early when I was young, in the abuse of a babysitter. I'm young. I don't know how to interpret it. I'm starting to define it, 6, 7 years old, as I must be bad. I must have done something wrong. I must deserve it. This is who I am. This is who women are. And this is what the world looks like. So this is all happening internally. And I start believing that about myself. So what do? When you start believing it, you start acting in a way that supports your belief. And so I started acting in a manner that was supporting this. And I had this wake of broken relationships behind me because I viewed all women as people that wanted to hurt me. And so I am not going to let you hurt me. So I'm going to live in such a way to get what I want out of it. And when I'm done, discard it. And I didn't even realize I was doing that, right? So that's the process that we get in with these limiting beliefs. And I had it for so long until I met my wife at 25 years old, my future wife. And I realized if I keep this action up, this behavior up, if I keep doing this, she's going to be another person in my wake. And I really want to spend the rest of my life with her. I want to be with her, but I don't know how to stop being and doing, because this is what I've always done. It's normal. And I had someone challenge me at that moment and said, well, what do you want? And all I could tell him was what I don't want. I don't want her to be another casualty. I don't want to be angry. I don't want to see her as someone who's trying to hurt me. And he stopped me and he said, Rick, I didn't ask what you didn't want. I asked you what you want. It was such a hard question. It seems like a simple one, but I couldn't define what I wanted. So what would I keep getting? What I didn't want. Because that was normal. And it's that self-fulfilling prophecy. I kept cycling until he said, until you can describe what you do want, you're going to keep getting what you don't. And so that was the challenge with normal. Okay, if this isn't normal, if there can be a different normal, what would I want it to look like? And I had to define it. I want a healthy relationship, a loving relationship, a long-term relationship, one with companionship and compassion and love and forgiveness. I want those things. Never experienced them, but that's what I want. So now my normal that was broken, I'm reshaping to a new normal that's healthy and whole. And I've been married for 33 years.
That's awesome. And and I know your wife and I know your family and I know you, and it's been amazing to see how God has used both of you to impact far beyond your family, but to impact cities and nations because of your relationship. You go on to talk about life happens.
Yeah.
So what do you mean by that? I mean, we all know that things happen in life, but we've seen bumper stickers, life happens, but what do you mean by this?
So, and that goes back really tied to the very first chapter with Am I a Mistake, or this idea where many of you said, well, Rick, you don't understand what I've been through, right? And I would have to tell you, and everyone I coach, I've not been through what they've been through, yet I can successfully get them from where they are to where they want to be. Why? because I help them stop defining their lives, their future, and their identity by the circumstances, environment, or people around them. This, right? We allow this to influence who this is, right? And so when we can shift and understand this is a part of it, it impacts, there's emotion, there's feeling, life happens. I didn't ask to be abused by a babysitter. I didn't ask for my dad, my birth father, to not be a part of the picture. Right? There's a lot of things I didn't ask for. Then there's some things I did ask for, and I made choices with that aren't serving me. But the reality is these external circumstances, when life happens, life happening isn't the problem. The problem is how we define that life that happens, how we interpret it. And this is part of the framework we'll talk about in just a second. The source of most of our beliefs comes not from the experience itself, but from how we define or interpret that experience. I want everyone that's paying attention, I want you to hear this, because this is a real critical place that we underestimate. Your limiting beliefs that you have, the ones that I have, they didn't come from my experience with that babysitter. That was life happening. It wasn't okay. Painful, sorrow, broken, all the emotions, all the feelings, that's real. But my limiting beliefs didn't come from the action of what happened to me. My limiting beliefs came from the way I interpreted it and defined it. And I decided I was unworthy. I decided I was at fault. I decided women were. And I made choices in how I interpreted and defined the circumstance and the situation that began to shape how I believe. So when I say life happens, it's owning the fact that, yeah, it happens. But it doesn't have to define you. It doesn't have to be the source of your belief system. It is real, but it isn't necessarily got to be the clothes that you wear that says, here's who I am because of what's happened to me or the environment, right, that I'm in. Because the environment may say, hey, this is what my family, my grandfather, my father's father, my mother, this is the world we lived in. We lived in poverty, or we lived in this place, and this is what the generations have been. And why do we keep cycling that generation? Because we've accepted that this is what the Torrison family looks like. This is our life. I mean, your own story, right? And with your parent, your mom and your dad, and the whole thing in Japan, and the whole, you could say, no, this is all that the Stringers deserve and will have. And at some point you had to decide, you know what, I think there's something greater, something more that I feel inside of me. And you have to grab a hold of it and then get out of the comfort zone and risk. So that's, life happens, but it doesn't have to define you.
Well, in the end of your section 2 through chapter 8, and then going into section 3 on Limitless, and going into chapter 9, 10, 11, and 12, I was thinking as I was reading through that, because I know, and you use this as an example, but even in my life, I found I had a lot of compensatory facade, where I compensated on the outside, put this parameter on around me to somehow cover up the insecurities, the pains, the hurts on the inside. And I really saw, as I was reading the transition in your book, you're really addressing that, because you're dealing with, let's get out of the external mindset, the external circumstances, and putting on these facades. Let's dig deep and to find out what the root causes are so we can have a different mindset.
Yeah, 100%. So I think the fulcrum of the whole book and what's in this second section, and really what I think becomes most powerful, is this framework. The framework that I describe in the book is not new to me. I didn't create it. I didn't come up with it. I just interpreted it. I think it is a framework that is true in life. It's how we all get to the outcomes that we get in our life. It's a universal truth. And here's how I defined it. Here's how I put it together, right? I believe this, that all of the outcomes that we get in our lives, good and bad, but the fruit of our life, the outcomes, the results of an action or whatever it might be, big or small, every outcome we get in our life is a result of a behavior or action that we take. Whether it's conscious or subconscious, all of the fruit is I treat you well and I bless you, there's a blessing in return, right? There's a relationship of an expectation of how I act and what I'll get. If I curse you and if I'm angry, I'm going to receive from the world that same type of anger, right? And so if I do good work, I'm going to get good results from me. They may not be the best. They may not be what other people want, but it's character. I'm going to show up well. So here's the process. If our results are a product of our behavior, where do our behaviors come from? Every behavior that we do comes from a belief that we have, right? So our beliefs, and I just talked about this a minute ago with experiences, the source of our beliefs are how we interpret and define experiences in our lives. So something happens in our control or outside of our control, we interpret it, understand it, define it. That way we define it and understand it starts forming a belief. That belief demands action and behavior. Our behaviors and our beliefs are intricately tied together, whether we realize it or not. We'll not act contrary to what we believe. We might try to for a little while, but we always said what we actually believe is going to show up. It's going to come out, and I can't sustain acting in a way that is opposite of my character or what I believe. So my beliefs drive my behaviors, and all my behaviors get an outcome. Now, we know this in the work world and coaching world and our personal lives. If we don't like an outcome, what do we typically try to do? What's our first resolution of outcomes that we don't like, either personally or professionally? Where do we put our energy? Where do we typically do it? I'm literally asking.
Oh, you're literally asking.
Yeah, literally asking, right? I'm literally asking, where do you typically put your energy when you realize the outcomes you're getting are not what you desire? Our first move is to change what? Our behaviors. Our actions.
Or we should be.
That's what we try to do. Like, give me a better system, work harder, get up earlier, go find something to do differently, change a behavior, because this is what I'm doing, this is what I'm getting. It just makes sense. Change what you're doing. And you have to change what you're doing to get a different result. So there's a truth there. Mm-hmm. That is absolutely true. What happens, though, for most of us is we end up right back where we started at some point, no matter how many times we change our behaviors.
Like annual resolutions that never happen.
Yeah, we seem to always end up back into something. Man, and some of us who have strong wills, like you and I mean, I've got a pretty strong will. I can change my behavior and get a better outcome for a long time. But eventually, it's going to end up back where it was. Life will happen, a gut punch, something unexpected, stress, anxiety, and I will go back to the comfort zone. I'll go back to the behaviors that I've always done.
That's a great point, Rick. And if you can address that a little bit more, because you really touched on even the natural laws and what we would call laws of reciprocity. Mm-hmm. You know, with what you do has a response. You show friendliness, you get friendship. If you are angry towards someone, you get that reciprocation. Yes. But at the same time, with these resolutions we make in our lives all the time, we will always, under pressure, because pressure magnifies, we always go back to what we're comfortable doing. Yeah. And we become satisfied for a moment till we become dissatisfied again.
Right, and it's a cycle. Mm-hmm. And then we get frustrated and we just stop and say, and then that's when we start saying, well, this is how life has always been. Mm-hmm. This is the way it always works out for me. My friend who's successful in business and has had 5 marriages, right? You would look at his world here and think, man, this guy's got it going on. And then you look at his personal life and say, ooh, it's a mess, right? This energy that he's expending here, he said, this is normal. This is what life looks like. This is what it's always going to look like, so it keeps repeating itself. So here's the thing on the framework that's really important that we typically don't get to. Because what do we talk about? Behavior modification. Change your behavior, get a new outcome. True. But how do we sustain a transformative outcome? Something sustainable, transformative. We have to deal with the belief that drives the behavior. If we don't address the belief that drives the behavior, we'll never get a new behavior in a sustainable way. It just won't happen because that behavior is tied to something we internally believe about ourselves, others, the world around us. So we have to make the next step to actually get a different outcome that's sustainable or transformative. And we have to understand the belief. Where did we bring this on in our lives that cause us to act a certain way that's causing us to get a certain result?
You've shared at some meetings that we've been at, and you were sharing about many people say, I can't. Yeah. We have to come to a place of realizing, regardless of our personal inadequacies, our own personal inabilities or perceived inabilities, we can. Yeah. With the right tools, with the right mindset, with the right choices, we can make a difference and make change in our lives.
That's 100%. That's the whole premise of Born Limitless, is the belief that there is this limitless opportunity in front of us if we deal with the limiting beliefs that are guiding us or driving us, right? And so I do this exercise with people, and I won't do the full thing here, but if I had you just say, I can't, and fill in the blank. I can't do math. I won't ever be very good. I'm not going to accomplish anything. If I had you say that out loud and asked you what energy did you feel as you were saying that, you would feel heavy. It would be like, man, that's just, I don't even like saying it. It's like, oh, that's just not good. Our words have power. Our words have energy. Our words have emotion tied to them. So when we declare certain things, we feel that declaration. Or you declare to me, Rick, you're not, you'll never, and you can't. I feel that energy. It hits me, right? And so if I'm not equipped to deal with it, it's going to become clothing on me and become a weight. And if I hear it enough, I'm going to start believing it, which means I'm going to start living in that manner as if I can't. But if we start saying, I can do anything, I will accomplish. So I'm trying to become a bestseller, right? I wrote on this book, national bestseller. It is not a reality right now. I don't know for sure if it will be, but I am speaking that it will be. I'm declaring that it will be. So now what happens? My energy sits up. My efforts increase. Everything I'm doing is now focused on what it takes to get to that end result. It matters what we declare. And here's what I say about that is you don't have to believe what you declare. That'll come. You just need to start declaring it. I've been living in a less than life for so long to think that because I just declare it's greater than, tomorrow I'm going to wake up and it's all perfect. It's not that kind of manifestation. You know, people talk about, do you believe in manifestation that you can just, and yes, I do believe we can speak certain things into existence, but it's not magic. It's energy of how we were wired and created. When I speak life, life begins to form. When I speak death, death begins to form. It begins to manifest because that's the energy that I'm putting out, right? And so if I speak life over myself, I can, I will, I am. I have a 30-day challenge I put people through, and they get a 60-second video every day, and they make a declaration of themselves, and then I have them write those declarations on the mirror around them and stand in the mirror, and every day for 30 days, I am, I am, I am, and it's a different declaration, a positive declaration over their lives. The transformation that people will share over 30 days, man, it was really hard to say that, and I didn't like looking at myself and saying that I can or I am, and at the end of it, they're just sitting up like going, no, I am, and they repeat all 30 to me. And they say it as if it's already true, because it is.
Well, I know you and I have had conversations because it's really about your motivation. And even, you know, and as it says in your book, national bestseller, it's not because you just feel like you need to get your identity or your affirmation because it becomes a bestseller, because you have something to say. And you really do have a passion to help the people that you've been coaching and consulting and working with. So the content of what you've written, being a bestseller, is going to help more people. So I really appreciate your motivation by why you want to do it. And I think getting things in perspective is important. And you said another thing, that we have to be able to look to where we're going and keep our vision of that destination rather than what we're going through.
100%. Yeah, you talk about that all the time, the vision of our destination, right? That's so critical. In coaching, we talk about it as future pacing. We actually ask you to put yourself as if that which you dream about or desire, that vision, that goal, is already done. Stand in a place where it's completed and it's finished. What will it feel like? Who's with you? Right? What's the sounds? What's the energy? Because if we can actually see ourselves there and feel it and tie emotion to it, because we were created to have emotion and feeling. That's part of our createdness. That's good, but we've often talked about our emotions and feelings as bad. But they're the most powerful thing that we have. They can be used for good or they can be used for bad, but we should never disagree with them or try to tamp them down or say your emotions and feelings aren't real or you shouldn't have those. No, you should, but how you interpret them, how you engage them, what direction you point those in make all the difference. Right? And so seeing, projecting, declaring these things bring energy to your body. Like when I said, if you say I can't, I won't, I'll never, you feel weight. And then I say, okay, now I want you to declare you can, you will, and you are. How do you feel? And I can sit there, and even if it's on a Zoom camera with them, I can watch their bodies go. And they just start sitting up like, I can, I will, I'm going to. Now, it doesn't mean it's going to happen, but it's the first step that we need to take to be able to get to that place. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, I hope you guys are catching the conversation and the power of our mindset and our beliefs. It's not magic. It's not mumbo jumbo. It's not psychoanalysis on a couch. This is how we were wired and created. We were created for life, to have a purpose, a future, and a hope, right? That's what drives me. You and I know this, and I'm a person of faith. And so my faith drives why I do what I do. The national bestseller list wasn't even on my radar until someone said, if you want to get this book into the most hands possible, let's go on a strategy. And the best way is to pursue a national bestseller. Mm-hmm. Not because I have the title, but because that title opens the door for the message to reach way more people than I'll ever reach on my own.
As I was reading through the manuscript and then the book, Rick, and of course knowing you personally for many, many years, I really see this as a tool also, an encouragement of principles and strategies to implement in personal lives and in a corporate context, because under so much pressure right now, people need to know how not to be afraid of the mountains, not to be afraid of the giants in the way, but how do you overcome them? Every obstacle becomes an opportunity.
That's good.
Right? And so we have to look beyond what we see in front of us and find the strategy and get the wisdom to overcome that obstacle.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. And that's why we started where we did. That's why the book is put in order, because we first have to start declaring and challenging a belief. Then we have to identify the lies and begin to replace them, flush them, cut them off, say they're no longer a part of who we're going to be. But just because we've done that doesn't mean the future is going to change. It's just the journey to get us to a different outcome. And so we've got to go through that process. First, can I even believe it's possible? Yes, I'm going to choose to believe that it's possible. Second, can I identify the limiting beliefs in my life? Pay attention to my language and my words and what I'm saying and how I'm describing myself or what I'm allowing people to say. Sarcasm is a great way to realize we think it's funny, but there's truth in that sarcasm. We use it to deflect, right? Typically an inner belief or something inside of us that we're not proud of or we don't like. And we've got to be honest to look in the mirror and say, I need to be real, to identify where I'm at and the beliefs that I have that are not serving me anymore. I would say this to many of you who are watching. A lot of the beliefs that we have over our lives that we would call limiting, at one point in our lives, they may have served us. They actually may have protected us. They may have actually been something that was useful in that season in our lives. But as we matured and grew, we didn't know how to let those go. And so what was protecting us has now become a cage for us, right?
Do you think that because I don't want to jump ahead of you here.
No, that's okay.
But I think because one of the chapters you talk about forgiveness.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Because I find in so many individual lives, and you said this about deflecting, and we tend to project our own insecurities onto other people or deflecting what we're feeling. And a part of that is I've seen so many people limited in their lives because they carry so much wounds of unforgiveness and bitterness. Not to say that that you weren't wronged, but oftentimes those people move on with their life and don't even think about you. And yet we're stuck in that moment. How do we get people to break that moment so they can move into their potential?
Yeah, so part of what I share in the book at the end is really, and I actually walk you guys through a step-by-step process from identifying a limiting belief, the source of that limiting belief. How do we so a limiting belief that we hold for a long time in our lives is often like an umbilical cord. It's tied to something, a source. That source is no longer a part of our lives. It doesn't care if we exist. It is no longer in our world at all. Yet we have an umbilical cord that is still feeding us. For me, a 6-year-old moment was still feeding my 25-year-old self. Right? How do we cut an umbilical cord that's been there so long, feeding us a belief system, right? And then it may be tied to a family member, someone we love, someone close to us. And we think, well, I can't cut that because that's mom or that's brother or that's friend or whatever it might be. And so we stay bound or trapped to unforgiveness, to brokenness and woundedness that we were never meant to carry because we don't know how to release it to its own justice, right? So here's the thing, we're justice-minded people. We look at the world and want justice. This is wrong, it needs to be made right. That's true in our own lives. So in this process that I talk about in the last part of the book, I think it's appropriate to talk about this now because it is a part of it. I tell people, again, this comes from my faith, right? This idea of forgiveness, but forgiveness, really, everyone, regardless of faith, and I will say this to you guys, regardless of what you believe faith-wise, let me ask you this. Have you ever recognized that you acted in an inappropriate manner faith world may call it sin, but it's something, you did something wrong, hurtful towards someone else, right? And you recognize that and you realize, man, I can't do this anymore. So when you're carrying that ill treatment of someone, it's a weight and we feel it. It just has this energy with it. But have you ever gone to someone and asked them to forgive you? Said, hey, I'm sorry, would you forgive me? Doesn't matter your faith. Have you ever asked someone for forgiveness or said, I'm sorry to them? If you have, how did you feel when they said, man, it's okay, you're forgiven, I accept it? It's like, whoa, you feel this release, this freedom, right? And so that's part of the process is going and seeking forgiveness for the things that we do. But the most powerful part is when we can grant forgiveness to those who have done something against us. The problem with that is we don't typically do it because we think that means I've got to be back in relationship or I've got to accept what they did or somehow I'm justifying that their actions, my babysitter, I went through a process. I held on to the unforgiveness because I thought if I forgive her, she's not asked for forgiveness, she's not even in my world, I don't even know where she is. There's no relationship. This is 50 years, 43 years ago. She's nowhere in my world. So I can't have a relationship. I can't see her. I can't find, not in my world. But yet I was tied to this umbilical cord. So part of it was forgiving her and her actions and releasing her to a higher justice. One that I could never execute myself because I found I was bound and limited because I was not releasing that situation. So now that situation was defining how I viewed life. And I was like, that's not okay anymore. I'm jealous for my own freedom. So this idea of forgiveness is, one, asking for forgiveness for the things we've done, that releases. Two is granting and giving forgiveness to the people that have wronged or hurt us or somehow come into our lives in a painful manner. And understanding that when you do that, you're not accepting what they did. You're not justifying what they did. You're not asking for a relationship again. That's a whole different conversation. You're releasing them to a higher justice and releasing you to walk back into your createdness, your design, and the future and the hope that you're called to. No longer being defined by what someone else did. It's that victim to victor, right? And no one likes to say that they're a victim, and I don't want to play the victim thing, but we often find ourselves as this victim. Doug, you don't understand what's been done to me. That's why I treat women this way. If you knew what has happened to me, you'd say it'd be okay. And I was like, no, I don't think I would. Because you're not free. Because you've defined yourself as what was done to you by someone who doesn't even care about you. And now you are umbilically tied to them until you sever that.
So liberty and freedom for us, regardless if it's, because there's nothing more debilitating than a broken or wounded heart.
All right.
And many people respond differently.
Yeah.
But you talk a lot about honest assessment.
Yeah.
And that when we go and deal with the framework that you've given us, it's not necessarily linear, because in the Western culture, we think linear. And so everything's got to be A, B, C, D. It's got to be done a certain way.
Right.
But yet, we have to get past that mindset and begin to have an honest assessment. You address that quite a bit in the book. Tell me what you mean by that, honest assessment, so we can move on past the pain and past that place of being stuck in the past.
Well, I tell you, and all of you that are watching, thank you for going through this process. I hope you're gaining some value in this. And as we kind of move towards the end and share some final things with you, that's really a foundation. You've got to be willing to look in the mirror without judgment, without criticism, without self-condemnation, and ask yourself some hard questions, or find a strong relationship that you trust that can ask you some hard questions without feeling condemned or criticized. Because our freedom begins when we're able to look in the mirror and say, I don't like this about how I do things, about how I show up. I don't appreciate this part of my life. And instead of burying it or ignoring it or thinking it goes away, because it doesn't, until we deal with it rightly, until we cut it off and walk into our freedom, it's always in there until someone pushes that button. How many of you know you thought this was done? 10 years later, you said, I never thought about it, and someone hits that button that was hidden, and they push that button, and all of a sudden something comes out of you, and you're like, where did that come from? It's not that you weren't free and didn't walk through a process, but there's more freedom yet to come. And that button being pushed helps you recognize, go, wow, there's some more work I need to do. Don't discredit the work I've done, but there's more freedom that's waiting for me to walk in the fullness. And so a self-assessment, being willing to ask some hard questions, about that idea, what we said from the very beginning. Is this normal that I'm living in? Is it actually normal? Or have I settled for something less than what I was born, called, and created to? And if we think we've settled for something less, no matter what our experience tells us, if we think it's less than, then what do I need to do to start walking forward into something else? I need to self-assess, start there, get someone to help you go through a process, to ask the right questions, to crush that belief, that limiting belief, replace it with a truth, and then begin to develop behaviors that mirror that new truth. Does that make sense? And forgiveness is a big part of the end of this, and that's really that process of releasing the source of that experience or encounter where we defined it in a certain manner. The other part of forgiveness is forgiving ourselves. I would tell all of you, have some grace on yourself. Give yourself some grace. Don't be so hard on yourself. You're not perfect. It's so important to forgive yourself for believing a lie, right? Wow, I believed this for so long. It's not true. Doesn't matter how old you are, how young you are, how successful or how challenged you are. Same process, same truth, right? Same journey. And so that's really what this book is about. It's the one piece. It's about a limiting belief and that framework and our own stories of how we got there and how we can identify, crush, and replace so that we can walk out new behaviors to greater outcomes.
Rick, born limitless, crush limiting beliefs, cultivate an infinite mindset, and unleash your true potential. Rick Torrison. Rick, can you kind of wrap it up for us and kind of give us, in twofold question here, where do we go from here?
Yeah.
And then wrap it up for us. Give us a summary of what's important and how we can help get this message out, because I believe it's a critical message today.
Well, I would say, I guess a couple things, and I guess I'll talk to those that are listening. So Doug, first, thank you. Thanks for being our guide through this. Thanks for asking me the questions. Thanks for helping me formulate answers over my life, right? And just the journey we've been on. This reality and revelation that I have is like all of us. I would say you already are, and you're becoming. And so this journey, and you said it early on, is all challenges become opportunities. And if we look at ourselves as learners and people that are growing, then we can give ourselves some grace and we can grow, right? Absolutely. And you've been a big part of that journey for me. So I'm thankful for that. I would say, I guess as we wrap up, I would say this book, it's simple, 100 pages. It's not a difficult read. There are some stories and some processes in here to help us set an understanding of where we are and how to get to where we desire to be, to dream again, to believe again. Here's what I understand and what I believe, and here's what I would encourage you to do. One, get help. Get someone that can help guide you, walk you through, ask you these questions. Surround yourself with people who are ahead of you. There's not going to be perfect people. I've got a lot of different people that I've mentored. Then I've got some coaches. Then I've got some intimate relationships at different levels that speak into my life, and I give them space to speak into my life. I don't have to own everything they say, but I'm willing to listen and ask, is that true? And if it is, what do I need to do about it? So create a good environment around you, a good community around you that's going to help you continue to grow and to challenge your comfort zone a little bit in love and in kindness. I tell people, if you ever feel condemnation or criticism, those things aren't for you, they're against you. Conviction's a whole nother thing. Conviction leads us to healing and strength and restoration and wholeness and a future. Condemnation, criticism, rejection, those energies and emotions aren't designed to help us get anywhere, but to slow us and they're slow death, right? And so make sure you're around people who, they may convict you, bring conviction, but you don't feel condemned or criticized because of them or what they say. So that's really important. Then the other thing I would say is watch your words and your declarations. Listen to the words. If you say but a lot, that's an indicator that whatever you said before that, you're disqualifying. But for the most part, when we use it, is a sign of a limiting belief somewhere. Yeah, I could do that. Doug, I'd love to go with you. This would be awesome. But I just never have enough time. But I really can't. That but, everything before it, that but is saying those things aren't really true and I don't believe it. Typically. There's some good ways to use but. Hey, I've been terrible at this, but I'm getting better. That's a projection forward. I'm disqualifying that I wasn't good and saying I'm going to be. There's a good way to use the word but most of us, when we use but, it's indicating a limiting belief. So don't be afraid to identify those limiting beliefs in your life and understand that that's the first step. And then, is its source a truth or a lie? If the source of that limiting belief is not based on a truth, it's how you interpret it in that moment, then what is true? And begin to replace it and declare that truth. As you declare it, the behaviors will align and the outcomes will change. So this is what I'd say. So follow me, right? If you guys haven't already, I've got a private Facebook community. It's called The Limitless Leader, and it's for people who desire to grow and be a part of a community that want to grow. So I'd encourage you to be a part of that. You can message me directly, reach out to me if you want to talk about coaching. I've got some group coaching that are foundational around this idea of limitless leadership. And I do a lot of speaking for keynotes and different people around this idea of our being born limitless and untapping that and understanding that we all have limitations, but they don't have to define us. And so I would encourage you in that as well. And the last thing I would say, and I say this in everything that I do, and I just want to speak directly to you guys. One, thank you for being here. Thanks for following along and being a part of this community. But I want you to know this. I believe that your best is yet to come. I believe it with all that I am. That's why I do what I do. I believe that your past was never meant to define your future. Your past was meant to inform it and refine it, but not define it. And oftentimes we live our lives with our past back here as the lenses by which we view our future. And imagine if you're looking at me with your hands like this. If you all were doing this at home, looking at this video, right, you would be able to see it. You know it exists, but it's choppy at best. It's not clear. These are the lenses we often view our future through because we allow our past to mark it. When we can begin to clean our lenses through this process of the revelation of being born limitless, we clean our lenses and begin to see our future as it was intended to be. So your future is a blank page. It hasn't happened yet. And too often we allow people, circumstances, environments, and the world around us to be the author of our story. What I want to encourage you with is it's time for you to pick up the pen and become the author and star of your own story. You may not be able to control the circumstances, the people, the environment that you're working in or going around, but you absolutely control the most important thing, you. Your thoughts, your beliefs, your actions, how you walk into those environments, no one can take that from you. So I want to encourage you as you pursue the limitless life that you were born and created for. Understand that it's time to pick up the pen and be the author and star of your story again. Stop letting the world, circumstances, or other people be the author of your story. It's your story. What's it going to be? And it doesn't matter how old you are, how young you are, how challenged or how successful you are. I believe that you were created for more. Not more stuff, not more things, but more influence and impact, more future, and more hope. So here's the thing. I don't know what your more is, but I've given my life to help you discover it and to walk it out. So if there's any way I can serve you in any capacity, please reach out. Don't hesitate to let me know how I can continue to serve you. And Doug, thank you. Absolutely. Thanks so much for being a part of this journey with me and helping us walk this out today. Absolutely. I'd encourage you, if you have not followed Doug Stringer, Dr. Doug Stringer, Somebody Cares. I'm going to put a plug in here for him. You need to find him, follow him. He has a podcast. He has books. He's got an amazing heart. And so I can't walk away from this without adding more value to you by introducing you to a whole world of life-giving compassion, hope, prayer, you name it. This is who my friend is. And so I encourage you to check him out as well. But guys, thank you. Doug, thank you. Appreciate it.
Well, I think we ought to close this out like you do in all your messages and all your podcasts.
Okay.
My name is Rick Torrison, and I'm believing your best is yet to come. I believe you were created for more, not more stuff, but more influence and impact, more future and hope. I don't know what your more is, but my passion is to help you discover it and to walk it out. God bless you.
God bless you. Thanks. Appreciate it.
I quoted you on that one.
Yeah, that was good. Thanks.